All right, so I've tried to mute everybody. Please mute yourself if you are somehow unmuted. And if you have questions, go ahead and type those into the chat box as you as you think of them. Let's see, what else? Other housekeeping duties. This spring is devoted to vegetable gardening and all things that kind of go with gardening. Um, Always trying to improve on these. So if you see anything that you would like to be a part of one of these presentations, please feel free to reach out and let me know. Either you can put it in the chat, you can private message me, or you can just simply email me. So I do a fall gardening presentation, and what that does is talks a little bit about what kinds of vegetables you might want to put into your garden. This one is spring with some summer vegetable gardening information. So if you're somewhat new to Georgia and you're not quite sure what you need to plant in your garden, here we have a lot of different growing seasons pretty much all year round. So if you are from the upper Midwest or Northeast, you're in for a pleasant surprise and that you can grow stuff here all year round, which is really nice. We do have some issues with disease and things like that, but trade-offs, you know. So without further ado, let's jump into it. I've got a lot of slides here. Most of them are going to be about vegetables, specifically vegetables, things like that. And those will be uh, not a lot of detail associated with them. I'll talk a little bit about them, but if you have questions about specific vegetables, feel free to put it in the chat box. Okay. All right, so let's just jump right in. So if you're going to be vegetable gardening or spring vegetable gardening, doesn't really matter any time of the year. But specifically, we're going to jump in about spring and summer because winter vegetable gardening is just a little bit different. So in selecting a site for your garden, if you're going to do that on your own property, whether that is a sunny patio or maybe you're putting a new raised bed in, something like that, you're going to need to have at least 6 to 8 hours of daily sunshine, preferably closer to the 8. You want to try to avoid trees and hedges because that's obviously going to cut down on a lot of the sunlight that you get. The other thing, you're going to want to make sure that you have water close to the garden. So if you are mobility challenged, obviously you probably want to have it as close to your house as possible to make it as easy and simple as possible. Also, the convenience to the house is nice, but it also serves as a deterrent for deer. So we have a lot of deer in Gwinnett County, in and around the surrounding counties. We don't have really any hunting season to speak of, so whatever deer we have are very happy when you decide to put a garden in because, hey, they love vegetables just as much as you do. So if you have the garden closer to the house, it's easier to deal with those, and you can make sure that you're taking care, putting up motion detector sprinklers, maybe a fence, that kind of stuff. You need to also think about ground topography. We have a lot of hills here. So if you're in a home that has very a very flat area or just gently rolling hills, consider yourself lucky because a lot of us don't have that. So we're constantly fighting a slope to our garden. There are obviously things that you can do like raised beds that will help prevent any of the excessive erosion that can come with an in-ground garden and really hilly areas. You want to make sure that you're looking at the correct type of soil. So, really rich and humusy, like organic matter in there. So you might have to amend your heavy clay soils. They may not drain very well, and your vegetables don't particularly care for that. So there are some things that you can do. And if possible, avoid high traffic areas. So you may only have maybe a little corner by the sidewalk or something like that that people are walking all the time. Well, what happens if people cut across that area? So you have to kind of think about that. Okay, so what kind of soil is best? Some of my other presentations have shown the soil triangle here. So you have silt, kind of silty. Sometimes you have clay. Sometimes you have sand and loamy type soils. So clay has very tiny particles. Sand is going to be rather large particles. Um, and silty soils are going to have kind of an in between. And so, really, to me, the best kind of soils to have are ones that are kind of in between. So, like a 33, 33, 33 kind of mix. It varies. Sometimes they say, like 45, 15, things like that. It really depends. Sometimes it's all in what you prefer. But this is what you would kind of look at. So, I would say something over here in the sandy clay loam area, that would be and that's over there by the 30. And then if you follow it up from the 70, so clay and kind of separate, that's the kind of the best type of soil for growing. It's going to hold water because clay has really tiny particles and those hang on to water in those pore spaces more. You're going to have a little bit of silt and kind of a loamy. Loam would be like a duff on your under your forest canopy, leaves that fall down and organic matter, stuff like that. That's going to kind of be mixed in there so that it's a little fluffier for roots to get through. Organic matter helps with that. And then sand, of course, sand is much larger particle and it aids in allowing for the soil to drain better. So a good mix of all of those is really good for your plants. And just because you don't have it, don't give up hope. You can actually create it just by amending the soil. So here you go. There's some types of soil, sandy, loamy, all of that. Um, So you also need to know what kind of pH you have going on in your soils. So across Gwinnett County and most of central middle part of North Georgia, it's all going to be fairly acidic. Or on the acid side. So I would say like 5 to 6. Sometimes you're lucky and you get, a 6.2 or 6.8. But generally speaking, it's far more common to see a more acidic soil than it is something in the neutral 7 or even higher range, 7 to 8. It does happen, but not very often. And it's mostly just because you have amended the soil somehow with lime. Maybe you've limed your grass. Maybe you've got you amended the soil long ago for something else, or maybe it was previously a large field when you had a farmer that was tilling it, and now it's a subdivision, that kind of thing. But generally speaking, if you have relatively virgin, untouched soil, it's probably going to tend more towards the 6 to 5.8 range. So having that soil pH and knowing what that is, and we can help you with a soil test, which I'll talk about in a second, that's going to help tell you the a relative availability of the nutrients that are in the soil, and we'll talk about those also. So the macronutrients and the micronutrients are all available. I just did a really good presentation on that on Georgia soils and reading Georgia soil reports, and went a lot more into the geology of the soil and what that means. But basically, most plants, there's some exceptions, blueberries, gardenias, camellias, things like that, that prefer more acidic soils. But generally speaking, most plants are going to like a 6 to 6.5, which is pretty close to neutral. And those plants are going to like that because that is kind of that middle range where they're allowed to uptake those nutrients. It means it's maximum bioavailability for those particular macronutrients that the plant needs the most of. So that's what we kind of shoot for when we're looking at amending our soils around here. So as I was mentioning in the previous slide, pH and nutrient availability. So you can look at this little infographic here, and I've drawn a line down the middle of roughly where that 6.2, 6.8, where the best bioavailability of those nutrients are based on the pH of the soil. So you see you've got your nitrogen and your phosphorus and your potassium. So the NPK, when you buy a bag of fertilizer or some or liquid fertilizer, doesn't really matter, it'll have NPK. So you'll have those like 10, 10, 10. That would be nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And then you have the next batch of minerals or nutrients that the plant needs more of, calcium and magnesium, then sulfur. And as you go further down that infographic, the plant needs micro doses of those. So iron and zinc, manganese, aluminum, copper, boron, and molybdenum. Plants need about 13 different micronutrients. Some say 15, kind of depends. But generally speaking, this is what they need the most of. And you can see at that 6 to 7 range, right kind of in the middle, that's where you get good bioavailability of all of those. So with acidic soils, or those that we typically have here in Georgia, you're going to have increased availability of things like iron, manganese, aluminum, decreased availability of things like phosphorus, calcium, and magnesium. So sometimes, depending on the plant's need, you have to kind of adjust that. So neutral to slightly acidic soils, 6, 6.5, that range, usually optimal, like I mentioned. And when you get alkaline soils, which we really don't have a lot of around here, you might see that more up in, say, Tennessee and Kentucky, where you have limestone-based soils, you'll have a decreased nutrient availability. So micronutrients like zinc and copper and iron are less available, and then you have to adjust the pH in order to get more available for the plant. So you can see here how plants grow at different pH levels. So right smack in the middle, like 6.5 to 7.7, right kind of in the middle, you can see those plants are pretty big. They're doing really well. So by those nutrients and that bioavailability, that's where the sweet spot is. So your plants are going to do really well. All those nutrients are super available to them. But you notice as you move up the scale into the more alkaline area, 8, 9, 10, they get really unhappy because the nutrients they need aren't bioavailable. Same thing as you move to the other side of the scale and it's more acidic, same thing. Those plants can't get the nutrients that they need. So they don't get as big, they may not produce as much fruit. You see the one up near 10 has discoloration of the leaves. It can't get the nutrients it needs. So it's really important to know what that pH is so that you can adjust it. And here you go. Here's the macro and micronutrients. They're all essential. I don't have oxygen and water and sunshine on here, but those are also considered nutrients. But you can see the macronutrients are the ones the plants need more of: nitrogen, potassium, sulfur, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, and then over here on the micronutrient side, chlorine, boron, magnesium, nickel, molybdenum, zinc, copper, and iron in much smaller amounts. So when you're looking for a fertilizer, you might want to think about one that includes those micronutrients so that you don't have to worry about it. As we have a lot of folks that have raised beds, a lot of that soil is a soilless mix. It's not one that actually has mineral soil in it. So you have to make sure that whatever fertilizer you put in there includes both the macronutrients and the micronutrients. And you can check that stuff out on the back of the bag. So what do those numbers on the fertilizer bag mean? Well, there are little sayings that you can hear. There's like roots, fruits, shoots, roots, fruits. Here we go, up, down, all around. They're cute little acronym type things that you can kind of remember so that you realize why it's important. So nitrogen, that one is used in really large quantities in plants, and that's because that's what causes them to green up or to grow up. So any new growth that that plant's going to have is going to be because of nitrogen. Phosphorus, so that's going to be your middle number on your fertilizer bag. That's going to reach down to help the roots. That's the root system. So, up, down roots, and then potassium, that's going to promote all around well-being, or in other words, all around. It also has for fruits. So when you have a very heavily feeding plant like tomatoes or blueberries or, apples or plums or anything like that, pecans, very, Definitely. Those are very heavy feeders. And so those are going to use a lot of potassium. So usually you're going to have a depletion. So it's important if you have those that you make sure that you're testing your soil periodically every year and a half or so to make sure that you're getting those plants enough of those nutrients. So you can see here micronutrients, what are needed, germination, vegetative growth, reproduction. That's when you're getting your fruits, your flowering, and then your fruits. So plants just want to live. They want to complete that life cycle. Most of your garden plants are going to be annuals. So like for instance, here you have soybeans or peas or something like that. And then these are the elements that they need. There is a lot of chemistry. I try not to kill people with chemistry. But even if you're looking at what a plant needs and you're looking at the fertilizer needs of the plant, especially if you're looking at organic type gardening, there's a lot of that in there. You got to know what plants need. And if you're looking at organics specifically, you need to understand that if you have a compound, so like fish meal or blood meal or something like that, you got to know what elements are in there because if your plant is lacking something, you got to go find the fertilizer, the type of fertilizer that plant needs and provide it. And you got to make sure that whatever is in that mix is actually bioavailable, something that that plant can use. All right, so the first and foremost, time to get a soil test. So the best times to do that really is fall, but we get probably most of our folks that come to want to do that in the spring because they're all excited. They're thinking, I'm going to garden. I'm growing some stuff this year. I'm going to make a go of it. I got to know what to do in my soil test. And that's good. Hey, we'll take it whenever. But just so you know, the best time to do that would be like fall because especially if it's a brand new garden. So if you really haven't done much in it before, know that it can take about 3 months for whatever nutrients you put into that soil to become bioavailable to those plants. So that's 3 months. So you could do it now and about the time we're kind of running out of time on that, but about the time you would plant for your summer crops, that's when that fertilizer will start to become available. That's when any lime you're going to put in will start to really become available. So if you do stuff like liming, especially with liming, do it in fall. So do your soil test, figure out if you need to adjust it too much, and get it where it needs to be, so that when you want to plant and you do plant, you don't have to wait for your plants to get those nutrients from that extra month or two where you didn't have the bioavailability of those nutrients. So how do you do that? Good idea. Good question. So we have a brochure. You can access that through that QR code there at the top of the screen. That QR code will take you to the brochure about soil testing. So basically, you're just going to collect a sample, get yourself a clean bucket, or get yourself a big bowl, something like that, that hasn't had fertilizer or dirt or anything like that in there. You want to break it down into zones. So here you can see that little map, wooded area, vegetable garden, grass, that kind of stuff. So break it down, front yard, backyard, vegetable garden, that stuff. Collect about 6 to 8 samples. So you're going to kind of push that turf back if you're sampling in your grass and get that 2 to 4 inches there. Put a random 6 to 8 samples of that in your bucket or your bowl. Mix that around because you're doing a random sample. And then you're going to take about 2 cups of that, give or take, and put it in a Ziploc baggie, label that, and then come on down to our office. And once you're at our office, we'll help transfer it to a bag, get that paperwork filled out. $8, we'll send that off, and you'll get a report on your soil, all the good stuff that you need to know in about 7 to 10 days. If it's rained recently, we'll probably have to set it aside and let it dry. The lab gets really cranky at us if we put that into a bag and it arrives at their facility and it's basically wet through the bag and then it's just everywhere in the box. They get really angry. So we might have to dry it. So try to do that if you can. This is what a soil test is going to look like. And so you can see they give you a really nice and easy line to read there. If it's above the line, you got too much. If it's below the line, you don't have enough. So they also put the recommendations down below. So you can see 75 pounds of limestone. Here, pretty much everything. This is for a vegetable garden, home vegetable garden. You can see here they pretty much have all of these nice nutrients. They don't really need to add much. Their lime is a little on the low side. So they are recommending a little bit of limestone. Usually get pelleted dolomitic lime. That's fine, easy to source. Got it at the big box stores. And then they'll tell you how to apply it here down in the recommendations area. If they're suggesting that you put in fertilizer, this little box here, let me see if nope, didn't highlight it. This little box here, it says fertilizer calculator. On that PDF online, you can click that and it will take you to their website where you can type in what you have and it will tell you how much of that using ratios you need to add for your lawn or your garden or whatever. So next up is organic amendments. So once you've got the soil chemistry out of the way and you know what you're doing, next up is organic amendments. So very important, especially if you're dealing with heavy clay soils. So this kind of stuff, what you see here, Black Cow is a fantastic, really good organic matter that you can mix into a heavy clay soil. So if you've got a in-ground vegetable garden, good stuff to add. Garden soil for in-ground use, good stuff to have. You've got some organic fish manure. You've got some biochar, that's a soil enhancer, worm castings, organic raised bed mix. All of this stuff is really good to add into, especially in a raised bed situation where you really don't have that or mineral soil. But if you are putting it in ground, then you can also add this in, especially if it's a very hard pan clay. And that's what a lot of what we have around here is. So I know sometimes we tell you when you're putting a tree in the ground or something like that, not to use an amendment, and that is the case. But here in a garden where you're just growing annual plants, it's fine. These are going to add that necessary organic matter so the root system can grow into that and do better. And then over the years, as you're tilling it up and moving it around, it'll get better and better. So only work the garden with a tiller or spade when soil moisture is right. That's very important to note. When it's super wet, stay out of the garden because what you're going to do is compact that. You don't want to do that. Not everybody tills every part of the garden, so you might actually be doing some problems to your garden and not doing a good thing for it. A hand test. This is a good one to tell if it's too wet. This is also a good one to do if you're thinking about doing a soil test and you want to know, are they going to yell at me at the office if I bring them really wet soil? So you grab a handful of soil, you crumple that up in your hand, and if it sticks like a big old potato there on the left, it might be a little bit on the wet side, but if it crumbles like that on the right, that's probably pretty good for a soil test. Uh, Probably not too wet, so that's okay. Just know that it may take a couple extra days if you bring it to us like what you see there on the left. All right, planting the garden. So most everybody, now that they've changed the hardiness zones, most everybody in this particular area, except for very far north Georgia, is going to be in zone 8. So you're either in 8A or you're in 8B, except for up in the mountains. Then that would still be in 7, and then except for down in the very far part of the state along the coast, and that's zone 9. So we're not 9. 9 is semi-tropical. We used to be 7B, but we have now moved up. We've moved down a little bit into 8. So 8AB. We're still in kind of a transition zone. So note that some years it may be warmer, some years it may be colder. You get a lot of yo-yoing back and forth, so it can make it challenging, but not a lot has changed. I will tell you that. So this is a nice planting guide. This basically tells you pictorially for zone 8 different crops here. Now we do have a really nice planting chart that UGA has come out with that you can print off, the internet. It's very pretty to look at. Sometimes I like to just look at it pictorially, and this is a nice one. So you can kind of see you've got blue means start indoors, yellow means put that in, transplant it outdoors, sow those seeds, and orange is harvesting. So you can very easily look and look over to the left, find your fruit or veggie, and then look in the middle, find that June, July based on the calendar, when you're supposed to plant it, when you're supposed to harvest it, that kind of stuff. So these are kind of nice, but again, UJ does have a planting guide that is a little bit more comprehensive than this. All right, so let's jump into um, these late winter, early spring vegetables. So I've got a bunch of stuff that you would plant in the late winter, early spring. And then after this stuff, we've got summer stuff. So first we've got lettuce. So there's all sorts of kinds of lettuce. I'm not going to go into every kind, but just know that pretty much any color, any flavor, um, you know, roughly looking stuff, sweet stuff, bitter stuff. You got it all. So this is just a kind of pictorial representation of all the different types of lettuces that you can plant, as you see below in those seeds. Lettuces you're typically going to sow direct sow. You can start them and then transplant them if you want to do that. But generally speaking, those are going to be a direct sow. You've got a little bit of a window right now where it's warm enough, but cool enough that you could actually put some lettuce in the ground or in a pot and grow it now. And you'll be able to harvest it before it gets too hot. So that's something that you can try. It's very easy. Lettuce grows very, very well here in the winter and spring. And we're probably past the worst of like 10 degree type weather. So just note it that if you do try to put it in the ground, we're supposed to have some cold weather this weekend. You might need to cover that up a little bit or just wait until like Monday or Tuesday. Collard greens. So around New Year's, that's a big thing. You have your collards, black-eyed peas, ham hocks, that kind of stuff. So lots of people love to eat their collards. You can grow your own. Very easy to grow them. It's something that's a good winter crop. And so if you're putting stuff in the late fall, this is what you would be harvesting probably from like January all the way until it starts to bolt when it gets warmer. So collards do really well here. They're a very good crop. Mustard greens. They can get a little spicy when it gets warmer, but these are another one that you can grow late fall, early winter, all the way through spring. Sometimes you can start interplanting. So if you want to come in, you've planted your greens, you can come in and start putting your peas, your English peas, snap peas, whatever you want to call them, in the late spring. And you can kind of interplant in some of this stuff. That just means you're putting them next to each other. If you have a community garden where you are limited in space, you only got a 4x8 bed or something like that, or maybe you've got some containers on your balcony, you know, try to put a whole bunch of different stuff in a pot. So you could put a whole bunch of different types of greens in a pot. And you can buy them individually. So if you don't have a whole lot of space, don't feel like you need to use the whole packet of greens. Or conversely, you can just, pull it out, thin them out, that kind of thing. Kale. So as you can see, there's a sampling of different types of kales. Um, I'm personally not a favor. I don't like the flavor of kale. I'm not big on it, but there are a lot of people that swear by it. There's a lot of different types of kale. You can see different colors, different textures. Some people like kale chips. You put them in the oven and crisp them up. You put like soy sauce and stuff on them. Sorry, I don't do that. But it grows very well here and does really well. It will bolt as it starts to get warmer. So this is a cooler season. So this is like a spring garden type thing that you would have. Siberian kale, same thing. Like I said, there's a lot of different types of kale. Spinach. So spinach does well in cooler weather. It will go a little bit further. There are some types of spinach, some varieties that will last into the warmer months a little bit. But generally speaking, spinach is going to be a cooler crop until probably like June or something like that, July. You can also put it in like late August or September, and then by the time it grows up, you can harvest it until it gets super cold in January-ish. The interesting one I put over here is that Malabar spinach. So that's actually not something that most North American gardeners would really know a whole lot about. This is like an African type of spinach. Sometimes it's grown in Caribbean countries, but it does really well here as well. This is like a viney type spinach. It's kind of weird, but it tastes very spinachy. And it's another option that you can grow in warmer weather. So for the others, if you like spinach and you like the flavor of that, you can grow good old regular spinach in the bookends of Georgia weather, and then you can try your Malabar spinach in the warmer months. Cabbages. There's a lot of different cabbages. So I've got cabbage seed here. You can usually buy the little transplants in the 6 pack or something like that. That's how a lot of people will do it. Sometimes people prefer to get the seeds and do it themselves, whatever floats your boat. This is a cooler season type uh, plant. So you would put this in late fall. It would grow winter, and then presumably you'd harvest it before it gets too cold. Just as an aside, if you leave it in there and you don't harvest it, and we get some super cold weather, that top outer layer of leaves will die, will get frozen, and then it'll shrink wrap on the head itself. And if you have a whole field of these things, it looks like a bunch of alien eggs. So very creepy. But you can still peel all that back and eat it as long as you haven't had like 2 or 3 days of below zero weather. Bok choy, this is a really popular one, also called pak choy. You can buy these. Sometimes you can find them as transplants, but you can also do them as seeds. And that's a good green. That's something that grows in the fall, winter, through spring. Brussels sprouts. This again is something that grows fall, winter into spring. You'll need that plant. A lot of times you get it as a transplant. And as that grows up, you get all those little Brussels sprouts that are on there, and you just harvest those off. And that plant just keeps growing taller, and you just pick them off, that kind of thing. So, fall, winter, spring type plant. And here you've got your peas. So you've got the snap peas, you've got different types, but you can have those. They'll start growing really well when it's, yeah, like 50 something degrees here. So most people have these in the spring here, and you just hope that you don't get a killing frost. But yeah, the sugar snap peas are really good. If you've got a raised bed, you can get usually cattle panel and just do a big loop, and then they'll climb up that cattle panel. They're a good one to have on the end of a raised bed, or in an in-ground area. They're good vining plants. Broccoli. So you can see there's a lot of different types. There's purple broccoli. They've got that Romanesco. Broccoli is a fall winter plant, and usually you're going to find it as a transplant. If it gets some cold weather on it, it's going to get sweeter. So you often get a second harvest of this. You get one main head that you can see growing there. You harvest that, leave the plant in there, and a lot of times you'll get two smaller heads that you can then harvest later. So this is a fall, winter, spring type plant. Usually you're going to harvest that in January. Cauliflower, you can see you can get a lot of different colors here. Same thing, fall, winter, spring. Cauliflower with blanching, that is a process where you deny the light. So basically, when you get that head and it starts to form, take the leaves, cover it up, rubber band it, do whatever. And that's going to actually make it taste a little bit better. So just a little trick of the trade. Swiss chard. So very similar to spinach. Swiss chard can tolerate more heat. You can get this rainbow variety. I think there's dinosaur Swiss chard, which is similar. It's kind of a rainbow variety, but it's got really pretty oranges and yellows and reds. So this is another option to spinach if you want to grow during the summer months. You can harvest it. You basically just cut it back and it'll continue to grow, and then you can harvest more as you need it. Arugula. So arugula can be kind of a spicy lettucey type thing for your salads, a green for your salads. So again, this is kind of an early spring type thing. Root crops. So you've got your turnips and stuff like that. We'll go into those. So turnips here, you get different types of turnips. So sometimes people just want the greens, and that's fine. We've got seven top turnip, which makes tiny, tiny little turnips. Nothing that you would ever do anything with, but a lot of greens because the people want the greens. So you could, if you just want the greens, know that seven top turnip, that's just basically the turnip greens, if you like that. But if you like to eat the turnips themselves, which they're really good, sometimes you can do mashed turnips. You can do just cut them up and eat them. You can put them on salads. They're really good for you. They're healthy. They got a lot of nutrients and stuff. Choose one of the other varieties like purple top or snowball, something like that. And don't let them get huge. If you let them get huge, then they get really woody. They're really better when they're probably about the size of a baseball in my variety. You can even get them smaller than that and they're tasty, but they make for a really good snack. Oh, and those things have to be sown in the fall and then they grow and then usually harvest them January, February. They are pretty tolerant of cold temperatures. So, and they're also a root vegetable. So, if it's going to be super, super, super cold, you might want to harvest them, but generally they can tolerate those colder temperatures. Beets, again, that's a root crop. That's going to be a winter, spring kind of root crop for you. And you can see lots of pretty colors below. You've got some that are like orange and yellow inside. You got some that are kind of striped, and then some that are really elongated and that kind of thing. Great for a garden here. They do really well. And sometimes you get nematodes and some other stuff that can eat along on the outsides of them, but you can just cut that off. Great for carrots and potatoes and beets, and you do a roast in the oven. Use some olive oil and toss that in there, and then stick them in the oven and cook them in a pan dish, and that really good. Can't beat that. Carrots, this again is a late winter, spring kind of crop, and you can get the rainbow varieties. Those burgundy colored ones on the right have an interior that has like a yellow middle. Very interesting, very cool. So you're not just stuck with the plain old boring orange carrot. You've got yellow ones. Um, some of them are super, super sweet. Some of them are really tiny, like you see the little nubby ones there. So again, those are a good winter, spring, early spring type uh, product. So you're going to put those in and harvest them out before it starts to get warm. Radishes, you can see there's a big variety of radishes. So they're going to mature pretty rapidly compared to other crops. They're doing much better in a cooler environment. So you don't want real hot weather. They'll bolt and they get tough and they get hot. So it takes about a week, a month, give or take, to put those radishes in and then harvest them. They're great on salads. They're great for snacking, that kind of thing. And they're also interesting from another standpoint. So you can do multiple types over the course of winter and early spring. But you can also use them as a soil conditioner. Who knew, right? So you see these gargantuan radishes that this guy's holding. That's called a daikon radish. And so you can, it's basically a cover crop. So if you have an area that you really don't have time to mess with tilling and it's heavy clay, you know that it's not going to be good for anything else, and you really just don't want to mess with it too much, but you want to plant it next year, toss some daikon radishes out there and let them do what's called bio drilling. So they basically grow into the soil, and just the process of them growing into the soil causes that soil to kind of break up. And then don't harvest them. I mean, if you want to, I guess, but don't harvest them. Let them just do their thing. They're going to eventually rot, and those nutrients will go back into the soil. But in the meantime, they've loosened that soil. They've added organic matter back to the soil. It's a cover crop. So that's an idea for you if you don't have time to till the soil or you don't want to mess with it too much. Toss some seed out there and let that do the work. Rutabagas. Very similar, like a turnip. Sometimes you'll get roasted rutabagas. That's a good root vegetable. Again, fall, winter, spring. You're going to be harvesting these in the spring. And you can eat them, you can mash them up. Sometimes people do mashed rutabagas, that kind of thing. It's a little spicier than a turnip. Kohlrabi. I call this the reverse turnip. These are really good. Grew up on these, eating these in my mom's garden. Way back then in the Wayback Machine, they really only had the greenish white variety, but now they have a purple variety. These guys will grow their root down into the soil, and then the bulb forms on top. So you can see there on the roots on that purple Vienna kohlrabi that the root system grows down in there, but then the bulb is situated on top of the soil. So these guys prefer cooler weather and usually will start to bolt when it gets warmer. So you'll got to make sure you get them in like late fall and get them out before it gets too hot. Onions. Everybody seems to want to grow onions. Um, they're going to grow at or near the surface of the ground. Direct seeded is going to have more of their bulb visible as compared to if you got an onion set from the Tractor Supply or whatever and buried that down in there. These guys are good to put around like if you have a raised bed, put them around the edge or something like that. Maximize your space and then harvest them, at will. I've got raised beds at my yard, do that all the time. And onions are great. They tolerate a fair amount of cool weather, and you can get them in different colors, and you can start them from plants, from sets, or from seeds. So they're very versatile. Plants, if you plant them in the fall and they grow over the winter, those a lot of times are going to be the biggest onions that you'll get. Some people don't like really super big onions. So, just kind of, whatever your thoughts are on what you prefer to cook in your own house. Garlic. So you see here, you've basically got, your garlic bulb, and you're going to break those apart, and then you're going to plant like you see that. So you can do that in early spring, and it'll grow up, and you'll get the green garlic and the head, and it's in the allium family. So if you've ever seen those big purple alliums, uh, the flowers that you see on a garlic, if you see that, that's why it looks like it does. So you could also try interplanting these with regular ornamentals and grow those. A lot of people will try to do that if you have an HOA that's a little particular, and you can hide them in the back and they look like a flower, but they're an herb basically. All right, late spring and summer. Now we're going to jump into what we would plant in, say, after the last damaging frost. So that's now because our hardiness zone is 8A. That's bumped us up a little bit. It used to be like April 19th, give or take. Now it's like the end of March. Really, I tell people don't go by that necessarily. Listen to what the weather guy says or lady. They usually tell you about 10 days out with fair confidence if there's going to be a cold snap that they're concerned about. They can see that coming. If it looks like it's going to be below zero, hold off until after that. But if they give you the all clear and they're like, yeah, it's going to get down into probably the high 30s, but we're not going to have any freezing weather, then yeah, you're probably okay to go ahead and plant at the end of March. Just know that you really need to make sure that you follow the weather. Don't just go by what the Farmer's Almanac says, because they don't always get it right. Okay, so tomatoes. So this is one that everybody loves. So you can see here, I've got a ton of tomato seed. Tomatoes, I'll go into a little bit more depth because they're a little persnickety. Tomatoes can get a lot of different diseases, fungal diseases, bacterial diseases, bugs, leaf-footed bugs, aphids. There's all sorts of things that love tomatoes. So you have to kind of understand if you want some of these fancy ones, like you go to the store and you see all these beautiful heirloom tomatoes or these funky colors, and you're like, oh, I want to try that. If you're looking at that now, it's probably too late. If you wanted to start your tomatoes by seed, you probably should have done that back in January. We're too close now to when you want to put them in the ground. You're not going to have enough time. Right now, because we're almost into March, only a couple days, you're probably going to have to hold off and you're probably going to have to put transplants in, which means you need to source those. There's all sorts of places around here where you can get different types of tomatoes. You're not stuck with just what big box stores have. So if you have questions about that, check out some of the farmers markets. We've got Snellville Greenhouse. They have all sorts of different types and varieties of tomatoes. You might try Ace Hardware. Sometimes they have different varieties. A lot of the smaller nurseries, Growers Outlet has different varieties grown locally, not always sourced from Bonnie Plants or something else. So just know that you can find some of these different varieties. You just have to look a little bit harder. And there are a lot of people that will sell them online. So you have to source them outside of that. So you really want to get them in as close to that last average frost. But when soil temperatures are a little warmer, they're probably going to shut down and not really produce if you have an indeterminate, meaning they continue to produce all season long. When we hit more than 70 degrees, so when we hit July and it's super hot, they just don't produce anymore. So just note that the earlier you can get them in, the better off you'll be. And I do have a Totally Tomatoes presentation available on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel that goes into a lot more detail about tomatoes. Cucumbers, lots of varieties here too. You see just a few of them. You can get the little lemon cucumbers, aren't they cute? English cucumbers, the really long ones. You can get the pickling cucumbers, all sorts of different stuff. That's just a sampling. These guys don't like super, super hot. They do better if you get them in as close to the earliest part of when the last damaging frost happens. Give them something to climb. If you can, they'll be a lot easier to find when you have to pick them. And you don't have to worry about turtles getting in there and eating them or squirrels as much. I have a lot of problems with that. Cucumbers are great, but they really don't like super hot weather. So just try to get them in as early as you can. Eggplants don't care necessarily about the hot weather. They're heavy feeders, so make sure that they have enough nitrogen. Very prolific. You will get a lot of eggplants. A lot of times you get them as a transplant. You see here I've got seeds, but they're usually readily available at your big box stores, just not tons of varieties of them. If you want the varieties, you're going to have to plant the seeds and start those inside. Got another presentation on starting seeds. Did that a couple weeks ago. That's up on our Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. Bell peppers or sweet bell peppers. Lots of colors of these: purples, greens, oranges, reds, yellows, burgundies. I mean, there's all sorts of everything in between. And they're usually, you got to leave them on the vine or the plant long enough so that they can turn that color. Most people don't have the patience to do that. They want to pick those things and eat them. They all taste relatively the same. They're just pretty colors. So you have to leave it on the vine long enough for the colors to happen. But again, most people don't like doing that. So just know that if you want those pretty colors and not just green, you got to give it a chance to ripen. Bush and pole beans. So these are a direct plant. You saw with the peppers, you usually get them as a transplant. But if you do get the seeds, make sure you start them early. Start them in January. Pole beans, bush beans, those are direct sow beans. So you're going to get your beans here. They've got burgundies, they've got golden wax colors, and you're just going to put those directly in the soil. Little trick: soak them overnight or for a couple of hours. That helps them germinate so that you get a better germination rate and quicker establishment. There are pole beans and bush beans. So obviously pole beans, they need to climb up something. You see those up in the top left corner. And bush beans are going to be something that just stays down close to the ground. Deer love these. So if you want to plant them, make sure you protect them. Okay? Because the deer will go after these first. Okra. So here you see a stand of okra. You can get purples, you can get greens, and you don't want them to get big. So you want to harvest them when they're little. And the plant will continue to grow taller and taller, and it will grow new ones up towards the top, and you make sure you harvest those. Don't let them get long. They get woody and nasty. So okras love heat. They will continue to produce through the hottest parts of the summer. They do really well here in Georgia. corns. So corn is hard to do in a raised bed or in a pot situation. Sorry, it is. So if you have an in-ground situation, you can grow some corn there. It's wind pollinated, so you don't have to worry about pollinators so much. Sometimes people will go out there and help the corn pollinate. Just know that raccoons and possums and some other things like to eat it too. So you have to kind of protect it a little bit. Lots of different colors. You've got some glass gem corn there. Makes a really pretty, you can either eat it when it's young or makes a really pretty dried corn for decoration purposes. But you've got purple corns, you've got white corns and strawberry corns. Some of them you can dry and use in decorations. Others you eat as sweet corn. Silver Queen is a go-to that a lot of people talk about, but there are some newer varieties that have a sugar content that stays it doesn't fade in the corn. Like sugar or silver queen, if you get it, you better eat it within a day or two. Well, basically a day of picking because that starch starts to fade, but there's some that will stay sweeter for longer, maybe up to a week after picking, and it's like you just picked it. Zucchinis, still fall into the summer squash category, but most people like, oh, I want some zucchinis. Very prolific, but again, we do have bugs. So if you really, really like zucchini or summer squash, consider doing successional planting. This is a warm weather crop. You put it in the spring. You'll start to get vine borers, all sorts of things like to kill them and feed on the vines. Consider putting, when you start noticing that they're fading and not perking up because the vine borers are in there, pull them out, get rid of them, throw in a bag, put them in the trash, and plant some new ones. And if that happens around July, you can probably get some more all through fall until you get to the frost. Sweet potatoes, they do really well here. You can get some sweet potatoes and grow them. You see that pan down there. That pan, just lay them flat in soil and you'll get all those what we call sweet potato slips, SLIPS. You can pluck those off and root them in a thing of water there and then just go plant them outside in your raised bed. You'll have to protect them from deer. They love to eat those too. And voles, they love to eat the sweet potatoes, but you will get a ton of sweet potatoes if you water them well. Hot peppers, they do fantastic down here. If you're a hot pepper fan, just, enjoy it because you will have so many hot peppers. I swear they do the best here of everything else, and I don't like them. They're pretty, but I don't like them. But if you have a thing for hot peppers, no, they do fantastically here. You're probably going to put them in as a transplant, or you need to start them soon, or sorry, start them in January. So by the time you put them in the end of March or early April, you'll have an actual plant to transplant. They won't do as well in the soil if you just put the individual seed in there. Pumpkins and gourds. Some people aren't aware, but pumpkins, if you look down there in the lower left, start green. I had a kid that I was at one of the Harvest Gwinnett gardens, and somebody had pumpkins in their bed. I don't remember who it was. And those are the raised bed gardens that Gwinnett has. And they had pumpkins growing. And I think I mentioned something about the pumpkins, and there was a kid there that was like 10 years old, and they're like, I don't see any pumpkins. And I pointed and I said, no, they're right there. And they pointed, that's green. And I said, yes. I said, it is green, but it's going to turn orange. And they didn't believe me. But you can see there, that pumpkin there is starting to turn orange. And so they start green and then they get bigger and then they turn orange, like what you see there. And then you harvest them and put them on your front porch. And in my case, I let the chickens eat them afterwards and then just recycle the whole thing over again. But gourds also, sometimes they're just for decorative purposes, but you can grow pumpkins for the pie. Sometimes deer, when they're really hungry, will eat these, believe it or not, even though the vines are pretty prickly. And they also will send roots down at the nodes along there. So if you do have some vine borer problems, fear not. Sometimes you can kind of push them along until you can harvest the pumpkins because they do put down a root at the nodes of the vines. Potatoes. So potatoes, lots of varieties. I got to speed along here. Summer squash, patty pan, and all this stuff. Zucchini kind of falls in there, but folks like the zucchinis. So you can see there's a selection down there. Patty pan, straight neck, yellow zucchinis, crook necks, all of those very, very prolific, very prolific. I love patty pan. Doesn't really taste like squash. It takes on the flavor of whatever you use, so it's great in stews and things. These are a direct seed, so you can put those in the ground. Again, vine borers, just rip them out in July, put some new seed in. A lot of times you can end up with a whole nother crop at the end of the year and you don't have to worry about the vine borers. Winter squash. So these are ones that have a tougher outer shell and can be stored. So you have butternut squash. I love butternut, very, very flavorful. Acorn squashes, spaghetti squashes, pumpkins. You got that sugar pumpkin there. A lot of different types of squash. These are storable. So if you put them in a cool, dark location, they will store for a long period of time and you can use them over the winter. Winter squash. Okay. How to plant seeds and transplants. I'm going to zoom. Remember, you can always get the slide deck. I'm going to keep talking. If you have to drop off, go ahead and do so. But again, this is recorded so you can catch the last part if you missed any. So planting depth. Smaller seeds like carrots and turnips and things like that, if it's a very small seed, you're just going to toss that on the top. If it's a bigger seed, it's something that you need to put down into the soil. That's kind of just the rule of thumb. Another rule of thumb with the small seeds, sometimes you can take sand, you can take a handful of soil and mix the seed in with that really well, and then use that to broadcast. It makes it a little easier. But on the back of those seed packets, you can see it's got planting depth. It's going to tell you. Just flip that over and look. It tells you does it need full sun, how far apart, plant spacing, row spacing, how deep do you have to plant it, how long is it going to take average for germination, and then how tall will it be. So just make sure you keep all of that in mind when you're choosing your seeds, regardless of if it's in a tub or a container or in ground or in a raised bed. Watering. So you're going to water that seed bed with a gentle spray. You don't want to wash them away. Remember, you want as flat an area as you can get. Wet that seed bed at least twice a day. Keep that thing moist until they germinate. If you want to put a little wheat straw or something on the top, if you're in a real windy area, that's fine too. I do that in my own bed, and it really helps keep the moisture in the soil. Monitor the rain. If you get less than an inch a week, get out there and water. That's after germination. You don't want to let them dry out because they don't have a very vast root system at that point. So you don't want all that hard work to go to waste. Get out there and water until they are fully established and then continue to water until they produce. So transplanting, remember I said certain plants are better if transplanted. So instead of using seed, it's better to use transplants. You can start them inside or you can just buy them, whichever is easier for you. But things like cabbage, broccolis, tomatoes, and peppers are going to do much better at transplants. They're going to establish sooner. They're going to have better root systems and you're going to get earlier crops and more of your produce. Bare root transplants, sometimes like with onions and things like that, are available, but they're typically going to be grown in like soilless mixes. That's a lot of what's in raised beds. Don't let that word scare you. So choosing transplants. If you're going to the store, look for the bigger ones, the heavier ones, the ones with better root systems, the ones that have pretty green colors, that don't have any yellow, no broken stems, that kind of thing. They're going to recover a lot quicker than if they were just, tiny little things that might get some transplant shock. Also consider, because you don't know where they necessarily came from, that you do some hardening of your plants because it still can get cold that during that time. So if you purchase them and they've been outside for a while, you're probably fine. But if they came out of a greenhouse, you want to keep them protected and you want to slowly establish taking them outside over the course of a week or so. Otherwise, you get a cold spell, they're going to die from transplant shock because they're used to that nice warm greenhouse. Planting them. Install them in the garden soil so that it comes up to about where the base of that root is, the same level where it was in the container. Don't plant it too tall. The only exception is tomatoes. There's a couple different ways you can do that. You can plant those deeper, you can plant them on their side, that kind of thing. Watering them. So make sure you water and keep that soil moist. If we're having a dry spring, you're going to have to put a lot more time into it than you were if we had a wet spring. So make sure you fill that depression with water. Maybe you have soaker hoses or a drip irrigation system. That definitely will help. You can buy little kits off Amazon. They're pretty cheap now. And if you're busy, it might be well worth your weight in gold along with a timer on your hose. So make sure that you get those wet and you keep them wet so that they can continue to grow. Potting soil. To avoid disease, try not to reuse soil that's been sitting outside or pots, especially with seeds, because what'll happen is you get something that's called dampening off. There's a fungus and it grows and it will basically cause that new little seedling that you got to germinate. It'll flip over, it'll get all soggy and nasty looking, and it's dead. So make sure if you're going to do seeds, if you're going to start seeds, you get that sterile potting soil, specifically for starting seeds. And you can get that at garden center pretty much anywhere. Try not to do that, you know, obviously can't do that for in-ground stuff, but if you're going to do it inside, tomatoes, peppers, the brassicas, broccolis, things like that, try to use a new bag of soil that's been sterilized. Peat pots, containers, cut those sides and directly transplant to the ground. It'll biodegrade. Don't worry about it too much. Just like that. You can also get these little newspaper makers. Does anybody have newspaper anymore? But if you do, you can use this. Try just to use the black and white stuff. Don't use the shiny colored stuff. So advantages, that's going to choose, you're going to be able to choose the variety of tomatoes that you want or peppers that you want. You can get harder to find varieties, colorful varieties, new varieties. There's all sorts of, like the world is your oyster type thing. You can try all of these really cool ones, not just the same old Better Boy and Early Girl that the big boxes have. Cold frames, that's a good thing to have right now because sometimes it's nice and pretty outside and other times it's cold. So when it's going to be cold, you just flip that lid down, and then when it's going to be nice, you pop that lid up. So it's going to help kind of magnify and keep it warmer in there. You get better seed germination because that soil temperature will be higher, and it can be used to harden off transplants. That's what I mentioned. So if you get stuff out of a greenhouse and it's been used to that nice, cushy lifestyle in a greenhouse, this can help because you can flip that lid up over time, a couple hours more each day until finally you just leave it up all the time, and then they're ready to go. Mulch, organic matter that decomposes, that's going to help with your soil conditioning. They help cool the soil. If you mix that in, that's going to add that nice organic matter that plant roots love to grow through. So periodically, you can either, mix that in, leave it as a top dressing, and then it'll mix its way in there. Lots of different ways that you can get it in there. Try not to put too much right next to the stem of the plant. It can, you can get some fungal growth and some other stuff there, and it also allows varmints like voles and things to get in there and eat the and cutworms to get to the stem. Cover crops, real quick, you can use crimson clover, rye, winter rye, that's just an annual. Southern pea, millet, winter legumes. Vetches and clovers are good nitrogen fixers, so they're kind of in the pea family. So that helps with getting nitrogen there, and that's going to help return to the soil, and then you can till that in, and all those nutrients go back in the soil. Here's one in a greenhouse. Garden pests and fall garden. Caterpillars, again, we're going to whiz through here. We're already running late. BT, that kills caterpillars. Aphids, these are just some typical pests. You can use insecticidal soaps, and that's a good option. You see an Abani plant. So here's the production stuff. in a commercial farm, and then your garden. So that's basically it. So I'll leave that up there. And let's see, let's look at if there's any questions. Sorry, I ran a little long. Okay. L. Kelly says, "Hi, Shirley. I enjoyed attending many of your garden presentations at Vines." Yes. Let's see. If your soil is wet and you want it to dry out, will it affect the test if you spread it out and leave it to dry for a bit? No, that's what we do. We just put newspaper down and we put soil on it. We just let it dry out and then we put it into the soil bag. If you have a chance, will you talk a little about lasagna gardening or layer, please? Don't have a lot of time, but that kind of I'm looking into doing another presentation that talks about alternative permaculture um, growing situations. So stay tuned. If that's something that you're interested in, I can make a note. Lasagna. And I'm hungry. I haven't eaten yet, so that makes me hungry. Gardening. Okay. Made note. So just like I said, stay tuned. There'll probably be something. Is there a planting guide for zone 7? Um, It's going to be pretty similar to zone 8 because remember, we were literally zone 7 prior to last summer. So it's about the same. Many times I would, people would be, oh, I don't want to plant anything until after April 19th or something. But we all know that usually people were sticking stuff in the soil long before that. Um, watch what your weatherman says. We're really in a transition zone. We are not tropical. 9, like if you were in South Georgia, if you're from South Georgia, yes, there is a different planting guide for zone 9, 10, and 11. That would be into Florida. However, zone 7 and 8 are very similar in what to expect. So I would just tell you zone 8 would be about the same as zone 7. Our ability to put stuff in the fall to grow all year round, it's all going to be about the same. So it's not really going to change a whole lot. The only difference would be temperature in the soil and whatever the weather gets. But if you're up in the mountains, again, it's going to be about the same as what it is here. You're only going to vary a few degrees difference, but not a whole lot. Um, join late, was the recording be available? Yes, it will. And if you look here, it says want to watch these recorded sessions, go to this YouTube channel, the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. So if you scan that, it will take you to the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel where this and a whole bunch of other stuff will show up. The other stuff's already there. But this will show up probably either tomorrow or early next week. Yes. Um, Definitely going to do a raised garden bed. Would you recommend using a weed barrier? Yes, definitely. So if you're putting a new raised bed in your yard, and right now there's Bermuda grass or zoysia or something like that, I do encourage you to get as much off as you possibly can. I know some people don't want to spray that, but you can use Grass Be Gone, which specifically targets um, uh, grasses versus broadleafs, things that you would put in your bed. I would encourage you to either scrape off or get rid of that top layer of grass and then allow it to kind of grow back, spray that with that Grass Be Gone, or just spray it outright with the Grass Be Gone. Then you can put cardboard down and then some type of weed fabric, and then put your raised bed on top of that. And that'll help prevent anything from growing up through into that raised bed, because that's really annoying when you have all sorts of grasses and weeds growing up the sides and popping out the top, because that's what they will do if you don't get the grass out of there. Uh, 0 Celsius. I'm not sure what that means. Oh no, I'm talking below freezing, 32 degrees or below. 0 Celsius would be really cold. Uh, thank you. Have to go. Yes. Email me for the slides if you want it. If you want the slides, just email me at the lisa.klein@gwinnettcounty.com and I'll send them to you. Okay. If anybody has questions about anything else that's popped up, feel free to put that in there. Otherwise, it's pretty much just a quick overview of spring planting, spring, summer planting. I have a lot of other presentations that go much more in depth into certain things like tomatoes or other types of vegetables. And again, if you have specific things that you're interested in that you want to know more about, I'm happy to do a presentation on those too. Just send me an email at that email, lisa.klein@gwinnettcounty.com, and I'll put that on the list. I do twice a month in the evenings, one lunch and learn a month. Sometimes I do those. Sometimes I have specialists or other agents guest speak on topics. And they're always different. They're always interesting. You always learn something. And, we're always there at Extension, whatever county you're in, just reach out and we are happy to answer questions. I'm also a certified arborist. So if you're in Gwinnett and you have tree issues, I'm also available to do some diagnostics via email. I don't come out on site, but I do that. Let's see. You asked if there was a link to the planting guide. I don't think I have that. I thought I had that in here. Apparently, I do not. But send me an email and I will give you the link to that. It's a very nice planting guide. I really like it. I always recommend printing it and keeping it easy. Would recommend putting cardboard on the soil now to help the soil. I mean, it's mostly just a weed barrier when you put that cardboard down. It's buying you some time. It will eventually break down. Don't use super waxy cardboard, but it's a good way to just put that down instead of using plastic weed barrier. But it will break down eventually. So a lot of times people will put that down and then they'll take wood chips or something and put that over the top of it. And that works well too. So you can get, it's called chipdrop.com, chipdrop.com, and they will dump a big load of wood chips at your house for use around raised beds or in your gardens or whatever. I don't recommend mixing that in the soil because it's as it breaks down, it uses too much nitrogen, but it's great to put on paths around your raised beds. It's great to put around the edges of woods, that kind of thing. Chipdrop.com. Just be prepared because they literally will dump truck load of wood chips at your house. So you have to be ready to come to do something with it. All right. Well, if nobody else has any other questions, I'm going to stop sharing. And I appreciate everybody that came. Thank you very much. And have a good evening. Until next time.